Hi, everyone. I'm going to give our lab meeting today as a presentation and workshop on how to make your research more and teaching more efficient, transparent, and impactful. And the reason for this is that most of us struggle with trying to basically be more productive. This is just like something that's fundamental to pretty much any career. If you go on LinkedIn and you'll see like endless articles from people in pretty much every single profession dealing with the same issue. It's a challenge in academia because we have less structure. And so being able to be productive is something that we carry around with us. Many of us worry about these things on our evenings or weekends. And so I'm going to try to give you advice so that you can worry less about it. And just understand that we're all doing this and that you'll never be as productive as you want to be. So part of this is making yourself more productive, but also managing your anxiety around it. The second thing I want to say is that one of the ways we're going to be productive is we're going to crowdsource notes. So Kate has created a Google Doc that's in the chat, and you can click on it and you can share notes. And that way you can kind of pay more attention to the slides and crowdsource and distribute the effort involved in taking notes around the presentation. Okay, the first thing I want to say, and I think this goes for any type of advice, is that advice is not a one-size-fits-all. And I encourage you to ignore anything that doesn't seem relevant to you or useful for your own goals and situations. I'm not trying to ram this down your throat, which is how some people take advice. This is not meant that way at all. What it's meant is that there's an array of potential things that I've learned or found useful or others have learned and I'm sharing here. And your goal is to kind of look at it and pick out the small number of things that you think would be helpful to you, given your unique situation, your own goals and plans, and to make you better at what you want to accomplish. So I'm not going to tell you what your goals should be. My goal is to tell you ways to achieve a number of different types of goals. And so think of it that way. Hopefully that also make you less reactive if there's something that doesn't work for you. Understand that I'm not framing it that way. And then the other thing that I always recommend is to just act like a scientist. So if you see something that might be useful for you, try it out. Collect some data, pilot it. And then if it doesn't work, discard it. And if it does work, scale it up, do it for the whole year or embed it in more of your processes or your work, strategies that you're using. And so this is, I think, the smartest way to take advice. And part of it is because this is not empirical. A lot of it's based on my personal experience, other people's experience. And so some things just might not be easy for you to stick with, or you might not enjoy them as much, or they might not be as fruitful for the, in the collaborations or relationships that you have professionally. But I do think it's really smart. And this is what I do all the time. If I hear somebody's advice, I'll often try it for a while. And if it does work, then I'll implement it as part of my regular way of working. And so that's, I think, the smartest way to take advice is to kind of pilot things out. So just think like a scientist while you're doing this. I'm going to talk a lot about some of the advice that's relevant to a lot of issues. But as many of you know, I have a column in the science careers section with June Gruber, Leah Somerville, Neil Lewis, and Will Cunningham. And so I'm going to flag some articles, or there'll be a lot of topics here that we've covered in great depth. And so if you really want to go in depth on some of these issues, you can simply go to our free, easy to download columns. And these are about 1,000 words. Often it's the combination of several of us who kind of agree and also have editorial oversight on some consensus about how best to do these things. So it's less idiosyncratic. Unfortunately, a lot of advice floating around is incredibly idiosyncratic. So what we try to do is put our heads together and find out what we have a consensus on, what we all think works in a lot of different contexts and different types of people. Okay, so I'm going to just talk to you about a few things today. I don't think we'll get through all these sections, but the first thing is about taking care of yourself. The next thing is about stepping back and thinking about the big picture. So if you're trying to be more efficient, it's important to ask yourself, efficient about what? And why am I doing this? And why do I care? What are my goals? If you don't know what your goals are, being efficient can just take you in terrible directions and often be very stressful. And then I'm going to talk more about specific skills you can build, and then finally how you can harness your relationships. Okay.
You'll get what.
So the first thing we're going to talk about is we're in a pandemic, but this article is before the pandemic, that there's a mental health crisis for graduate students, high rates of depression and anxiety. This is not just an issue of graduate school. You see the same thing among undergrads. And in fact, if you look, what data I've seen suggests this is a broader societal trend. Data suggests this is not a specific issue of graduate school. And for those of you who are watching this who aren't in grad school, this will resonate with you, that there's just high rates of depression and anxiety among young people right now throughout society. There's also a lot of stress on faculty, staff, and professors. And so there's huge amounts of stress and anxiety in society right now. This is really made much worse by the pandemic. If anybody's been watching the news this week, it's impossible not to be distracted at a minimum and stressed out. It would be, an understatement for many of us. So these are normal things that people deal with in our profession, in other professions as well. And so it's important to think at the first level about how to, manage your mental and physical well-being. And, as a psychologist, I go back to things like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so I schedule in my daily routine, my weekly routine, simple things like spending time with my kids in the evening or exercising in the morning. And that's a lot of times why I don't make meetings before 10 a.m. is I have to drop off my kids and get them ready for school. And then I try to go for a run or something. And so I prioritize those things. And, people want to meet with me and I have some other thing that comes up, I almost never say yes to it because these things are more foundational priorities to make sure that these basic needs are met before I'm able to even focus on work. So that's something that I highly recommend for any of you is to try to address these foundational needs. One thing that's not on here, but a lot of research suggests is critically important is sleep. I'd put that at the lowest level is make sure you get sleep. We know how much that affects your, from a neuroscience and psychological perspective, how much that affects your cognitive performance. And so if you don't prioritize basic things like that, you're going to suffer at work. There's no question, in addition to all other places of your life. So make sure that you fulfill those basic needs first in all the kinds of ways that you can to prioritize them. I always like this, someone took this and just drew Wi-Fi on it as if it's a more foundational need. And it turns out right now, this is really prescient because a lot of us are working from home and making sure that you have the capability to connect with your friends or family or do your work requires Wi-Fi. Ordering food and stuff like that as well in a safe way can require Wi-Fi. So there's a lot of things you need to do before you can even have the ability to focus on things like self-actualization. Like I want to, get my PhD or be an academic or, be a scientist in an organization. Those are kind of very high level self-actualization about your identity. And so you really need to make sure that you address these foundational, more basic needs first before you can focus on that. One thing, and this was from a New York Times article, it helps if you can find happiness at work. And so there's lots of writing about this, about the little things that you can do to make your work joyful. And I will say for me, I worked in lots of manual labor jobs. I come from a blue collar background. I had to work to pay for college. I had terrible jobs that drove me crazy where I looked at the clock every 5 minutes to see if it was closer to time I could quit and go home. And grad school was the first moment where I actually enjoyed what I was doing. I found it intrinsically interesting. Time flew by. I'd look and 2 hours were gone and I don't know where they went. And so eventually, if you find a job that gives you that feeling of, intrinsic enjoyment or flow, it's going to make life so much easier. And if you've had a terrible job in the past that you can compare to, this helps a lot. If you're not enjoying it, it signals to you maybe this is not the best fit. Either the best might just be the best lab, might be something with the project. It might just be that this career path you're on is not intrinsically enjoyable. But try to find out what you can do to build your happiness. And I use the Marie Kondo rule. A lot of times I get asked to do way too many things now. And one of the core questions I ask myself now as a key criterion to make decisions is, will it give me joy? And if it doesn't, I'm far more likely to say no to it because it turns out that's just something I've been able to prioritize more and more as I've gone through. And just thinking about how important that is in so many parts of my life makes my life richer by turning down the things, if I can, that don't give me joy. Obviously, some things you have to do, there are requirements, but to the extent that you can maximize this principle is going to make you happier. And so it's useful to think about also not only finding the things that you like, but how to be efficient at it. And so there's lots of battles on this on Twitter about how much faculty members or grad students actually work. I'm not even going to talk about that because I think it's very idiosyncratic. And to some extent, I think it doesn't matter, because I think that what matters to me and what I try to encourage my students to do is, and postdocs, is to work smarter, not harder. So I don't count your hours at work. I actually, some things just require a lot of work. But I think what's most important is if you find a way to do it as efficiently as possible. And so you can do things like crowdsource. So I'm going to show you some examples of that, but we're doing it right now by crowdsourcing note-taking in this lecture or workshop, whatever you want to call it. Other thing we're doing right now is leveraging technology. So let's see if I get this video going. This just shows you from when I was probably graduating high school, all the things that are in my computer that sits in front of me right now required different systems and different, I had to have an encyclopedia if I wanted to look something up. I had to have like a fax machine if I wanted to send documents to somebody. I'd have like a bulletin board to like take my notes and to-do list. A Rolodex if I wanted to be able to remember who to contact. Now all this is in our computer or in our smartphone. And so we have an incredible technology now that should make us more efficient if you use it well. You can also use technology to make yourself incredibly inefficient. If you're just on social media all day or watching YouTube videos or playing video games, those types of things I know firsthand are incredibly distracting and can take you away from efficiency. One of the questions that Suzanne asked is, how about things that may not give you joy now, but may lead to things that give you joy in the future? So I would say, and I'm going to have a slide on this later, is that one of the key traits that predict life success is patience. So a lot of times you might want to eat that marshmallow now, but if you hold off, you get 2 marshmallows in the future. My advisor used to tell me that's what grad school was like, is that if you could just like focus on this, it's a lot longer than, 10 minutes like kids waiting for that second marshmallow. But if you can just like put off some of the things you want, you get through. Once you're done, you have all these other doors open to you and greater earning power for the rest of your life. So much knowledge that you can use for so many different professions. And so and then the same principle applies to getting your undergraduate education. So those of you who did that paid money, enormous amounts of money, some of you, to get undergraduate degree to open those opportunities. The same principle applies to a postdoc. That postdoc, you've moved a bit up, you're making a bit more money, a bit more flexibility and creative freedom. But again, you're often doing it because you're deferring something that will hopefully give you more joy over something that doesn't in the moment. So this just gets repeated throughout life. Same principle applies to people trying to finish high school that are struggling. So this is just a principle in life in many, many domains, that something that matters a lot. So think also not just about joy in the moment, which is, hedonics, but think of what will give you joy in the long run. Sometimes, learning a skill. For example, one of the things that I was told to do when I was a graduate student was learn how to analyze your data in SAS at the time, as opposed to SPSS point and click. And once I was able to write code, I could cut and paste into all my other analyses, and it made me more efficient. And so if you take the time, or learning how to type when I was in high school, learning home row versus hunt and peck, it's painful to like go from hunt and peck to learning home row for typing. But once you do it, it makes you way more efficient. You work smarter, not harder. And then it frees up time to do things you actually might enjoy more in the future. So this is ways of leveraging technology and working smarter, not harder. So these are ways of thinking about the world. And so a lot of my advice here is going to be about leveraging technology to make you more efficient. And that includes things like social media as well, that there's so much you can gain from it if you use it well. Of course, if you don't use it well, it can be terrible. And also say that academia is getting better at leveraging technology in the last, I'd say, 5 years. But a lot of things we do are still like incredibly outdated. So if you look at the structure of our academic conferences up until the pandemic, which I think is going to radically improve this, they look not that much different from conferences from like 100 years earlier. The main difference you see is that these were just like old white guys because no one else was permitted in these circles. But what they actually did was almost, what we do now is almost identical. So you sit around and talk about a paper or a poster. You all fly to a common space to do this. And so we've improved, pretty dramatically who gets to go to a conference, but what we do at them has stayed remarkably static, and in my opinion, quite stagnant. And so there's this great example of, this video that went viral, and I bet it has hundreds of thousands of views now. At the time, within a few weeks of it coming out, it had 142,000 views. And many of you have probably watched this on how to create a better poster. And it was this really beautiful animated video about why posters don't work at academic conferences and how to change your poster to be more efficient. And you have a giant QR code in the middle of it. And I saw these these posters with this kind of model popped up immediately at conferences. And so this is what they recommend these are supposed to look like. And the video makes a case for this. And some people find it convincing, some people don't. But what was the genius of this video? I don't think the genius of this video is like, you should definitely use this model for how to build a poster. In my opinion, the genius of this video was the video. How many people are going to see your poster versus if you have it the old fashioned way versus like this? It's still going to be 5 or 10 people. I've had posters that 2 people have come to at conferences. Look at this. Oops, I thought I would highlight it. Again, 142,000 people viewed this 15-minute video. So I think the real lesson from this is if you can get some skills at how to disseminate your knowledge in alternative models, especially like a really beautifully animated video, you're going to have a far greater impact than if you just change your poster template. You know, you might get 6 people to come to it instead of 5. And so the incremental benefit of that is so little, and it still takes you 2 or 3 days to build a nice poster. If you could put a video together in 2 or 3 days and it gets seen by far more than 5 or 6 people, it's going to be more effective. And I'll just say that we've done this. So this is Daniel, one of my former students. He's now a postdoc. Did this for one of our papers. He was the first author on this with Marjorie Rhodes. And when the paper came out, he created like a very short little 5-minute video, put it on, created a YouTube channel, put it up, and it has 428 views. And so if he had just spent this same amount of time to build a poster, there's no way 428 people would have gone to his poster. You know, he would have 4 people who went to his poster. And so think about the power of technology and how you can harness it in a clever way that can increase the impact by, this is 2 orders of magnitude greater than the impact of changing your poster. Instead of 4 people seeing it or 5, it can go to 4 instead of 40, it go to 400. And so you're increasing your impact 100-fold without any extra work, just by using technology. And so this is, I think, some people are doing this more and more now and finding it's incredibly impactful and efficient. So you should be thinking, you are from a generation that's embedded in, immersed, you know, digital natives who grew up in this and use multiple platforms. Think creatively about how to communicate your research. Daniel also posted a Twitter thread about it when it came out. And you can see here, it had, you know, his single paper that came when it came out had at this point within a day or something, like 227 people liked it, 72 people retweeted it. I went and looked online, it's been downloaded almost 1,000 times. And this is just the preprint. The actual paper has been downloaded from the academic website many more times. So this is in addition to the impact of the actual paper when it comes out in a journal, and the journal sends out like the email to members, or the journal arrives in inboxes of or mailboxes of people who subscribe to it. This is in addition to that. It's bonus impact. So creating a preprint, putting it online, creating a social media thread. Twitter's excellent for this. Making a video that goes along, summarizing what's in it. That's the way that you create all these additional benefits of your work. I also think that there's lots of other critiques of travel culture. It's harmful to the environment. It discriminates against people who are caregivers, or often women, or people from institutions or countries that have less money, or people in difficult legal situations like the travel ban. So there's a lot of good reasons to rethink how we do conferences anyways, from a moral standpoint, but this is also from a self-interested standpoint. So this is a case where your self-interest and collective interest are carefully aligned. And so I've been part of, you know, I've suggested many times online and trying to argue that we should rethink how we do posters. You know, if there's a conference going on, post your poster online as part of the thread of the conference. Or we should actually have online conferences. So I've actually been to one. It's called Brain TC. And so I gave a talk that I was able to do on Twitter of 2 or 3 new papers I had, including screen captures, images. And I did it while I was on the train commuting. So I was able to give my conference talk at $0 of travel costs and do it, you know, in time that would have just been like lost time anyways, and do it from my phone. And many more people saw it than would have seen it at an actual conference. So think carefully about how you do this and try to leverage these. As I said, we're crowdsourcing note-taking. I crowdsource note-taking when I teach my courses. So I teach an Introduction to Psychology course. And the very first day I taught it, I decided to create a Google Doc, link it in the syllabus, and just share it with everybody. So everybody in class doesn't have to, you don't have 300 people all taking their own notes. All of a sudden, everybody started sharing. It created the most comprehensive set of notes, 80 single-space pages of notes that the students all shared and curated and edited. And also it meant that almost everybody was paying attention because they were able to like do one day where they took notes. And so they didn't have to take notes every day. If they missed a class, they didn't come to me asking, what did I miss in class? Because guess what? The slides were available. And so was a detailed, multi-page thing of notes their classmates took. So they all collectively benefited from it. And it helped the students who maybe suffered from, like, some people suffer, they're hard at taking notes, they're easily distracted, they can't do two things at once, or they've been sick that semester, so they disproportionately harms people who've compromised immune systems. So all the kind of principles we say we care about around equity are also solved by this. It's also more efficient for me as a teacher because it takes less of my time. So think about crowdsourcing. Today, if you have a chance, brainstorm about this and think about how you can use this efficiently in other things you do. Oh, by the way, this is like when I did my conference talk. This just gives you a sense of like the number of impressions and engagements of that conference talk and how high they were. Okay, so this shares the load. Crowdsourcing shares the load, allows people to focus, and it's incredibly inclusive. So it does a lot of things that we claim to care about. And you can also crowdsource research and professional questions. So I've done this many times, asked for and gotten great help on everything from my tenure materials. When I was going up for tenure, I just posted about it on Twitter, and several people emailed me with their their tenure materials. Super helpful at one of the most important career stages I have had. I've asked or shared research papers, and I think I have some screen captures. So I was writing a chapter on identity and economics. And I asked people to share articles, and of course, people are happy to share articles they've read or that they've done. And so this was like saved me tons of time. And I found all kinds of research in other fields that I wouldn't have otherwise probably found that helped me write this chapter. And then they got it was self-interested for many of them because they were sharing their own work. I was able to cite it. So it made science more efficient, improved the scholarship of the work, and made my life easier. I've also done this with open science things. We have an open science lab with lots of principles. I'm able to post and ask for statements on this. And you can see this got shared and liked a lot. And people gave me lots of great advice and material that I was then able to, borrow from as a template to improve my lab.